how can we manage cybersecurity with the human element? And I think that's one of the challenges I see in the world of technology and cyber. Like I love technology. It's given me a great life. It's afforded my family a lot of opportunities, and it's helped me grow immensely. But we often miss the human element of things. And the Cognitive Security Institute, what we do is we blend not just the technical, but we blend the behavioral sciences. So there's a lot of psychologists as part of our group where we look at not just, okay, if somebody was impacted by a phishing attack, what happened? What was the behavioral science behind that? Were they overwhelmed? Were they, what was their behavioral state or mental state as they were going through and clicking on some of those ransomwares? And what that allows us to do is create better frameworks and better ways to categorize some of these risks and threats that we're seeing out in the landscape, while also creating human-centered ways to solve for these. Because I think like 85% of budgets that are spent in IT are spent on tools and software, right? Buy a new router, buy a new piece of software. But those 85% of that funding still does not solve for the human element of cybersecurity and technology.
You know, when I did the podcast with your colleagues Win and Win Schwartau and Len No, we talked about in the first one, we talked about, cognitive cybersecurity, where, a lot of companies nowadays, the easy thing to do is buy tools, buy boxes, hardware, whatever it is to solve for cybersecurity. Meanwhile, according to my guest at the time, Win, the biggest flaw in this is the biggest risk factor is the human. And then Len calls it the attack surface. A human are the attack surface. Which is very, very interesting, which now, if you go around to any corporation around the US, Canada, and the Western world, I was up to recently employed by a large corporation where I had to spend almost weekly training. I had to take weekly training in cybersecurity, and it's all about social engineering, be educated about social engineering, how how attackers are trying to spoof you or make you think that there is something interesting in an email that you mentioned earlier, phishing. It used to be like, on a weekly basis, we had to take those training. But the education is changing, obviously, but the threat is changing too. So the people who are developing these things, I'm sure they have psychologists as much as the solution has psychologists. And they're studying all the human behavior and trying to figure out what is the weakest link? How do I get in? And it seems to me like if you look down the details of every cyber attack that, you're probably more familiar with this than I am, you would see that most likely there's a human element involved in most of them today.
Yeah, it depends on what report you look at, but it's something like anywhere from 70 to 95% of ransomware and challenges in an IT environment are a result of the human element. Now, maybe it's human error, right? We're overwhelmed. We're not reading the email to see that it's, a spear phishing attempt and we click on a link, or other elements of just human behavior, right? And we often miss that. So the statistics of how many times a human is kind of, I hate to use this term because I'm not a fan of when people say humans are the weakest link, is actually we're the strongest link. Yes, we are probably the most susceptible attack surface, but saying humans are the weakest link is hopefully as an industry we can be a little bit better on some of those
behind
terminology.